You made this documentary clearly very near and dear to your heart, The Zen Diaries of Garry Shandling. And you were very close with Garry, and Garry was a big mentor to you. And Garry was a mentor to a lot of us who came up in comedy in this generation idolized Garry Shandling. And I found out so much about him watching this documentary. And it was an interesting experience because it's a beautiful documentary, it's fantastic, and then at the same time, it makes me miss him all over again in this way that, so, you know, screw you.
It hurts to have feelings.
It hurts to have feelings, yeah, so I'm not doing that again. No more feelings. But I learned so much. There was something that I knew this, but I think it's going to really shock people because Garry was a very spiritual guy. Garry had a near-death experience very early in his career as a stand-up, and it changed the whole trajectory of the way he looked at life.
Yeah, he was writing episodes of shows like Three's Company and Sanford and Son and Welcome Back, Kotter, and he was doing stand-up at night at the Comedy Store, but hadn't gotten good yet. Mitzi Shore kept telling him, you know, you're just a writer, you're not a performer, and she was being tough on him. And one day he's driving his car in the rain, and a car hits him from behind, and so he gets out, and he's looking at the damage, and he's in between the cars, and another car hits that car from behind and crushes Garry in between the cars. And he goes to the hospital. And he was very proud of the joke he said as they brought him into surgery, which was just a little off the back.
Right.
and he says that during the surgery, he floated above, he heard everything they said, and then he saw the light, and a voice said, do you want to continue living Garry Shandling's life? And he said yes. And then he used that to work up the courage to be a stand-up comedian and do all the things that he did.
Get up on stage. And what he does next is really remarkable. George Carlin, of course, was idolized by, still today, by so many people in comedy. But then he was the stand-up comic. Yeah. It would be him, maybe Richard Pryor. But people just loved George Carlin, and he did something that took a lot of guts. He decided, I've got to go and see George Carlin and see if I can give him some jokes. And this is a guy who had, really no business doing that.
Well, he was, I think, 20 years old. He was 20 or 21, finishing up college. He drives to see a George Carlin show, which was, at that time, just at a little club, because he had just become the hippie George Carlin. And he wrote him a bunch of jokes. And George Carlin said, come back tomorrow, and I'll tell you what I think of them. And he comes back the next day. They're laid out, and he had written all over it. And he said, you know what? There's a great joke on every page. So if you want to be in this industry, I think that you are talented enough to do it.
Yeah.
And then Garry just moved to LA and took that as a sign that he could make it. And I think that's why he mentored other people like me, because George Carlin was so kind to him.
It's amazing. When you see this documentary, you see so many people today that are huge stars, incredibly successful, that Garry personally made their career possible, or helped it along, certainly, which is amazing.
And you had that weird experience where when you were being considered for the late night spot, so was Garry.
Yeah.
And you guys, your lives really intertwined.
Intertwined, and then after I got the late night spot, he got on the phone with me and talked to me, and I just couldn't believe it. He couldn't have been a nicer guy. He was just such a gentleman about the whole thing.
And so funny. I mean, I read through his journals. He had 30 years of journals, and the estate allowed me to read them because Garry was considering putting out a book. He was going to do something with his journals, but there would be these really funny things. Sometimes it would be very emotional, and other times he would just write jokes. But one thing that made me laugh was he did this movie called What Planet Are You From? And he wrote it, and it came out terribly, and he was very upset about it.
It was a misfire, yeah.
And so he wrote fake quotes for the poster. And I don't know if he ever showed this or he did it for his own amusement, but he wrote, I tried my darndest to pull this off, Garry Shandling. We all make mistakes. That's the last time I trust my instincts, Garry Shandling. I hate myself, Garry Shandling. And then he went, I thought Mike Nichols, Garry Shandling, Greg Kinnear, Ben Kingsley, Annette Bening, what could go wrong? Wait till you see.
You worked on the Larry Sanders Show, and the Larry Sanders Show, I think, really did create a new kind of comedy the single camera comedy that now I think there's a whole generation that only understands comedy that way. That's the only way they can see comedy. So Garry was certainly, at the forefront of that. You worked on that show, and when you watch this documentary, it's clear how much of himself he put into that show, and how tortured he was about it. And you were there to witness it.
Yeah, no, it was pretty intense because, when you make a movie, they shoot about 4 pages a day, sometimes 5 on a big day. For some reason, they would rehearse 3 days a week and then shoot 17 pages a day. Yeah. And so Garry was the head writer, and he had to act 17 pages a day. So if you walked up to him and said, hey, can you read next week's script? He's like, what? I can't do that. Right. And so he was really, really exhausted the whole time. And so it was an impossible situation, but he just powered through and made, one of the great TV shows of all time.
Yeah, but you can see how much it took out of him.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you watch the documentary. We have a clip here, and I believe this is where I love that you picked this clip, but it's just Garry being interviewed by, I don't know who the newsman is.
I think his name is Brian Lanahan, and he's from Canada. This is just a funny interview Garry did promoting this Warren Beatty movie he was in, and it just gives you a sense of Garry's vibe.
It gives you a sense of how particular and unique his comedy vibe was. It was so distinct. Let's take a look.
And you say that acting is hard for me because I'm still learning to feel instead of verbalize.
That's right.
Where are you now?
Well, I think I'm getting better at it. I find myself having to cover less with my comedy than I used to, and I'm able to sort of, and that's why it's a challenge for me, and that's why I wanted to act, because I think I can grow as a person through it. Maybe not. Well, that's okay. Well, you make me uncomfortable. I don't know why.
Why do you think?
I don't know. I have a couple of ideas.
The Zen Diaries of Garry Shandling is really special, and I would say I also think it's an important documentary for people to see. It's about so much. It's not just about Garry. It's a lot of it's about how comedy's made, how people try to make something funny, and what it takes out of them. And there's a lot of it that's just about people trying to figure out what life's all about. And so I took out so much from this documentary that I think people will love. The 2-part HBO documentary film, The Zen Diaries of Garry Shandling, debuts March 26th and 27th on HBO. Check it out. Judd Apatow, great work. It was amazing.